This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Rwanda genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga arrested in France. Fighting the coronavirus, Kenya orders cessation of movement between its borders with Tanzania and Somalia. And Somalia boosts its capacity to control desert locusts. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, wherever you're joining us. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi, also coming up. In sports, the German Bundesliga returns with a Borussia Dortmund 4-0 win over city rivals Schalke. We begin with the arrest of Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga in the French capital, Paris. The French Justice Ministry says Kabuga was arrested on Saturday after 26 years on the run. The 84-year-old is accused of funding militias that massacred about 800,000 people in Rwanda in 1994. He was indicted by the UN's criminal tribunals in 1997 on 7 criminal counts, including genocide. Kabuga had a $5 million bounty on his head. 2 other Rwandan genocide suspects, Augustin Bizimana and Protais Mpiranya, are still being pursued by international justice. Right, well, for more on that story, we're now joined by CGTN's Ross Cullen, who is live in Paris, France. Thank you, Ross, for joining us. Reports do indicate that Kabuga was arrested in a joint operation involving French police as well as the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals. Do tell us more about this arrest and how exactly it was carried out.
Well, Mahia, that arrest taking place at 7:30 a.m. this morning, French time, in a suburb just to the northwest of the French capital, Asnières-sur-Seine, is where the 84-year-old was found to be living under a false identity, confirmed by the Justice Ministry that the apprehension has taken place, and it was a joint operation, as you say, between many different law enforcement agencies, not just here in Paris with the prosecutor's office and the gendarmes, but also internationally, the police here in France, working with information also supplied by security agencies in the United Kingdom, in Belgium and in Germany. That arrest confirmed this morning of Felicien Kabuga, who is now in French custody.
You do mention that he is in French custody, Ross. What exactly happens next now, and also when will he be handed over to the IRMCT for prosecution?
Well, next for Mr. Kabuga is an appearance before the Nanterre prosecutor. Now, Mahia, Nanterre is just to the south of Asnières. It's another suburb to the west of Paris. And after he's appeared there, it's likely he'll come into the city centre here, into Paris, an appearance before the prosecutor here, and likely as well the Paris Appeals Court. Now, what prosecutors, as far as they're concerned, would like to see after that is his appearance before international judges in the Netherlands, in The Hague as well. And we heard from Serge Brammertz, he's head of the international mechanism that's been pushing for this arrest, and he has said that what has happened today serves as a reminder to those who are responsible for genocide that they can still be held accountable 26 years after their crimes. And we can remind ourselves of those crimes that Mr. Kabuga is accused of. He was indicted in 1997 on 7 counts, including genocide, complicity in genocide and incitement to commit genocide. The prosecutor said he was chairing the National Defence Fund in Rwanda as well, which oversaw the import of machetes into the country used in the killings in the disaster in 1994. Also that he headed up and oversaw a radio station in Rwanda which was broadcasting hate propaganda and inciting the public to carry out killings. 800,000 people lost their lives in just 100 days in 1994 in Rwanda.
And of course, Kabuga's home nation, Rwanda, has been calling on the international community to help them trace and apprehend Kabuga. Have French authorities there reached out to the Rwandan government about this arrest?
Well, trace and apprehend is the key phrase here, because it's been 26 years that he's been on the run. He fled Rwanda shortly after the end of the civil war and was said to have been in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, then moving to Nairobi in Kenya and then moving to Europe as well. Said to have been living in Germany, possibly Belgium, and now winding up. We can confirm that he has been living here in Paris. The French authorities, to start with, want to know how he's been able to evade capture for a quarter of a century, and they will find it very hard to believe that he didn't have any help. There were no accomplices whatsoever. He was living under a false identity in France. It's likely he could have been using different false identities in different countries as well. And the French, as we said, have been working with international agencies, so working with agencies in Africa, working with the international residual mechanism for the criminal tribunals that's been overseeing this push for prosecution of those people responsible for what happened in 1994 in Rwanda. So the next stop for Mr. Kabuga is the local courts here in France. And then after that, prosecutors want to see him make an appearance before international judges in The Hague.
All right, thank you very much for that. Ross Cullen reporting live for us from Paris, France. Well, the chief prosecutor of the International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals has reacted to Kabuga's arrest. In a statement, Serge Bramertz says Felicien Kabuga's detention is a reminder that those responsible for genocide can be brought to book even after years of being a fugitive from justice. The IRMCT chief prosecutor further adds that the arrest demonstrates that international justice can prevail with the support of the international community's law enforcement and judiciary. About 800,000 people died in the 1994 Rwanda genocide. Well, the National Public Prosecution Authority of Rwanda has welcomed the arrest of Felicien Kabuga, saying Rwanda will work with the United Nations International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals to ensure that justice is delivered. But just who is Kabuga? CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa now reports.
Felicien Kabuga has long been among the most wanted of all Rwandan genocide suspects. But even with a $5 million bounty on his head, for over 20 years he evaded justice for his alleged role in the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. Kabuga was indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in 1998 after he was accused of being the main supporter and financier of the Interahamwe militia responsible for the 1994 genocide. Hutu extremists killed over 800,000 Tutsis in the course of 100 days during the genocide. Kabuga is also believed to have made massive purchases of machetes, hoes, and other agricultural implements in the knowledge that they would be used as weapons of murder. He was also a co-owner of a radio station which reportedly incited violence. However, for years, Kabuga has evaded the authorities. He is reported to have moved from country to country as he dodged several attempts to arrest him. On Saturday morning, however, French police arrested the now 84-year-old Kabuga in a suburb in Paris. Once one of Rwanda's richest men, the fugitive was now living under a false identity. Kabuga's eventual transfer for trial may, however, take some time because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN.
Right, well, let's now take a look at what's happening in Africa as the coronavirus continues to spread across the continent. There are now more than 78,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus and over 29,000 recoveries across Africa. The death toll stands at over 2,600. South Africa has the highest number of infections on the continent with over 13,000 confirmed cases. 247 people have died in the country and over 6,000 have recovered. Egypt is following closely with 11,228 cases, 592 reported deaths and over 2,000 recoveries. Cases in Morocco are gradually rising. The country has more than 6,000 confirmed cases and 190 deaths recorded. More than 3,000 patients have recovered in the North African nation. Well, here in Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta has stopped people and passengers moving between Kenya's border with Tanzania and Somalia, effective from midnight on Saturday. All vehicles transporting cargo will continue their passage, subject to stringent measures. The president has cited a high number of people who have tested positive for the coronavirus after crossing from the two countries. Kenya has also extended the nationwide dusk to dawn curfew by another 21 days. The restriction will now stay in place until June the 6th. The president has also extended the cessation of movement in and out of the counties of Nairobi, Mombasa, Kilifi, Kwale and Mandera for 3 more weeks.
I am today directing as follows: that there will be a cessation of movement of persons and any passenger ferrying automobiles and vehicles into and out of the territory of the Republic of Kenya through the Kenya-Tanzania international border, except for cargo vehicles, with effect from midnight tonight, Saturday the 16th May 2020. There shall also be a cessation of movement of persons and any passenger ferrying automobiles and vehicles into and out of the territory of the Republic of Kenya through the Kenya-Somali international border, except for cargo vehicles, and this also will take effect from midnight today, Saturday the 16th May 2020. That all drivers of cargo vehicles shall be subjected to mandatory COVID-19 disease testing and will only be granted entry into the territory of the Republic of Kenya if they test negative.
Tunisian authorities have warned that increasing amounts of medical waste generated due to the COVID-19 pandemic now pose a serious threat to public health. As a result, waste management agencies have issued guidelines to be followed when handling the waste. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi got exclusive access to a medical waste handling facility and filed the following report.
Across Tunisia, there are 43 state-sponsored quarantine centers, as well as dozens of hospitals and several referral laboratories. Garbage contaminated with bodily fluids or other infectious materials is becoming a serious concern for public health facilities as they brace for a surge in the number of quarantined individuals and COVID-19 patients.
The national strategy put in place to fight the coronavirus pandemic and stop the infections is multidimensional and multi-axis. The main danger is the management of tons of contaminated waste at health facilities. The strategy was enacted as early as February.
In addition to thousands of frontline healthcare workers fighting COVID-19, National Waste Management Agency and National Environmental Protection Agency workers are also tackling the virus.
The National Environmental Protection Agency sends control missions to healthcare facilities, hospitals, recycling units and quarantine centers in order to make sure that safety measures are respected. This high-risk operation requires a considerable effort to guarantee the safety of all stakeholders.
Medical Waste Solutions is one of the private partners of the state. The company is in charge of transporting, disinfecting and decontaminating tons of garbage. The process is extremely complicated, but people here have been trained to deal with hazardous waste in a professional manner.
Treating hazardous medical waste is a complicated operation. The garbage is first transported carefully to this recycling factory, then disinfected with water vapor at 121 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. COVID-19 and quarantine waste is treated twice to make sure the virus is neutralized.
Despite efforts by the Tunisian government to ensure proper handling of medical waste, it has become usual to see discarded face masks in the streets or in the wild. Environmentalists have raised concern about this alarming problem.
Medical supplies and disposable personal protective equipment like face masks and protective gear pile up as medical waste that needs to be safely discarded. The Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Health have put in place a strict sanitary protocol to guarantee the safety of their personnel. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now to northeast China, where officials in the city of Jilin have ordered all private clinics to be closed. This came after a cluster of COVID-19 infections was detected in the city. Chinese Vice Premier Sun Chunlan has traveled there to monitor the situation and epidemic prevention and control operations. She has emphasized the importance of preventing any new cluster outbreaks. Those found with a fever are being sent to designated hospitals for treatment. Jilin City is under a partial lockdown with restrictions on bus and train services. China reported 8 new coronavirus cases on Friday, 2 of them local transmissions in Jilin, and the rest imported from abroad. Well, it's getting easier to move around Europe as countries set up travel bubbles. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania reopened their shared borders on Friday, allowing citizens to move freely for both business and leisure. Germany says most European travelers will no longer need to quarantine upon arrival, and Italy has approved a plan to allow overseas travel starting on June the 3rd. Now, with the number of coronavirus deaths in the United States likely to exceed 100,000 by June, the president has announced a new push to find a vaccine called Operation Warp Speed. CGTN's Nathan King reports from the White House.
Thank you very much. It's very hot today.
Operation Warp Speed is an optimistic name, but the US president has been optimistic, often without justification, throughout this pandemic. He says he thinks a vaccine can be found before the end of the year.
Today I want to update you on the next stage of this momentous medical initiative. It's called Operation Warp Speed. That means big and it means fast. You really could say that nobody's seen anything like we're doing, whether it's ventilators or testing. Nobody's seen anything like we're doing now within our country since the Second World War.
Virus experts believe the fastest a vaccine can be developed is between 12 and 18 months. But with the whole world working to find a cure for COVID-19, perhaps it could come sooner.
We must admit that the American people are suffering deeply.
By this weekend, most US states will have reopened at least partially. Many have not met the guidelines aimed at stopping the spread of the coronavirus. It's a risk, but one worth taking, says the US president, for the overall health of the US economy. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
You're watching Africa Live here on CGTN. Here's what's coming up. Somalia boosts its capacity to control desert locusts. And tying the knot in the face of COVID-19. An Ivorian couple shares their story.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping has chaired a meeting on the government's work report for the past year. The gathering of the country's top leadership reviewed both the challenges and achievements with a focus on China's campaign against COVID-19. The leaders also decided prevention and control will remain a priority for the rest of the year. On the economy, China plans to adopt more proactive and flexible fiscal policies to stabilize the job market and further open up. The meeting also said China needs to meet its target of eliminating extreme poverty by the end of the year. Well, Beijing is preparing to host China's annual legislative session next week after a delay of 3 months and with some changes. The annual meetings of lawmakers and advisors, called 2 sessions, will only last a week, 1 week shorter than normal. Only Chinese and foreign journalists who are already in Beijing can attend, not those outside China. Briefings and interviews will mainly be conducted online. CGTN will have comprehensive coverage of the meetings starting Thursday, May the 21st. Do stay tuned. Well, Somalia has boosted its aerial capacity to control locusts, which are threatening to cause a shortage of food in the Horn of Africa nation. The U.S. Agency for International Development is funding the spraying exercise that is expected to last for several weeks. From Mogadishu, here is CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo with that story.
These newly hatched hoppers are seen attempting to fly almost 1 year since a swarm of desert locusts originating from Yemen invaded northern Somalia. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says farmers face a huge threat to their crops in what has been described as the worst infestation for a quarter of a century.
Since July last year, we've been struggling to tackle a locust invasion that has affected many parts of the country. Somalia is the first country affected by migrating locusts coming from the Arabian Peninsula. We attribute the locust invasion to climate change.
It's the rainy season in parts of Somalia, and farmers are concerned about a possible second wave. For several months, authorities relied on this team to carry out manual spraying. But those efforts have proved fruitless as the locusts continue to move in search of more food. Mogadishu now says it has acquired 3 helicopters to boost its aerial spraying campaign, with the first 2 delivered on Friday.
We started by spraying locusts with manual pumps, followed by sprays mounted on vehicles. Today we have received the first batch of helicopters, 2 of them, and we expect a third one to join us soon. They will spray Galmudug, Puntland and Somaliland.
Last year, Somali authorities declared a national emergency as large swarms of locusts spread across the region, causing extensive losses to farmers in East and Horn of Africa. However, spraying pesticides by helicopters will only be limited to government-controlled areas due to the threat posed by the militant group Al-Shabaab. Experts, however, warn that unless eradicated, desert locusts will continue to cause more damage to crops and livelihoods, further worsening the country's humanitarian crisis. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The easing of restrictions in Côte d'Ivoire is giving couples a chance to tie the knot. One couple became the first bride and groom to be married Friday after the government lifted the ban on public gatherings. For the bride, though, the pandemic turned her special day into a smaller occasion.
Marie Andrea Ofumo and Ange Desiree Indat have celebrated their union, but not the way Marie had anticipated. They had no more than 40 guests, all sitting at least a meter apart and some wearing protective face masks.
I am really sad because if it had been before COVID-19, we could have invited a lot of people, but we organized it with very few people, so I am a bit disappointed, but it's fine.
Before the easing of the COVID-19 restrictions, the town hall in Côte d'Ivoire would only allow 10 people to attend wedding ceremonies. The government now says public gatherings of 200 people can take place.
It's a joy for us because the easing of restrictions changed everything. The family is here. Before that, it would have been a wedding for 4. We had to call everybody yesterday. There were not enough people. But now the family is here, so it changes things.
I think weddings will start taking off again and more people will come. You know, weddings are important. You only do it once in your life, so you want to have the minimum number of people that you love around. If you have at least around 30 or 40, it can just about do. But come with just 4, well, some still do it because they want to make themselves happy. I think the easing of the measures is a good thing, but everyone needs to be careful and respect the measures because the pandemic is here. It is real and it exists.
The town hall in the capital, Abidjan, will hold an average of 45 weddings a week before the COVID-19 pandemic. With the easing of the restrictions, that number is likely to go up. Chomhono, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. The German Bundesliga is back with Borussia Dortmund winning 4-0 over city rivals Schalke.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's begin in Germany, where the Bundesliga restarted without fans and with several restrictions after the coronavirus pandemic had put it to a halt. Borussia Dortmund got out of the blocks flying after putting 4 goals past their Ruhr Valley rivals Schalke. Talisman Erling Haaland opened the scoring for Dortmund in the 29th minute to get them rolling. 16 minutes later, Rafael Guerreiro doubled the 2012 champions lead. Torgan Hazard made it 3 in the 48th minute before Guerreiro scored his second and BVB's 4th to wrap up the victory. The Bundesliga is the first among Europe's elite leagues to resume action. Well, even as the German Bundesliga returned to action on Saturday,